good to be with you all this morning. I appreciate Nick's work. I appreciate when I ask that he just steps right in and takes what is upon his shoulders.
And
You know,
and the next time, do the one you think is so good.
yeah.
Ouch.
Because now we wanna know.
When men have preached sermons over and over and over again, they kind of know how long those are going to last. As you know, I have no idea. We're just plodding through this together. But I knew there was too much for one, and that was too much for two, and I think today we should get done with this in our third lesson together. When we studied last week how God wants us to be in a proper, what I say, vertical relationship with Him, that we have submitted ourselves to His will and that we are following the laws and the ways that He would have us to walk. We finished up last week with this exchange between one of the scribes and Jesus, where the scribe is commending Jesus for his answer, says, "You have really spoken truth here, for there is one God. There is no other but He. And to love Him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, with all the soul, and with all the strength." Now that is unity in relationship with God. That is the alignment. If you want to be in line, you need to love God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your soul, with all your might. And now we come to that vertical part. We were horizontal relationships that we were discussing. And that's what we'll go through today. To love one's neighbor as oneself. That is more than the whole of burnt offerings and sacrifices. So this is our finishing up on these commandments, and this is that horizontal relationship for us. For you, reaching out both ways from man to man. And I want us to pick up and go through these commandments together and discuss those together, and then we'll finish this up. So, we start off with number 6, and that is, you shall not murder.
That's a lot of crows.
You grew up probably hearing it, thou shalt not kill. Most of your modern translations have correctly interpreted this as murder. There's a difference. There's 2 Hebrew words. There's a Hebrew word for kill and a Hebrew word for murder. And this is murder. There's been a lot of pacifism that has been brought up amongst folks because they think I should not ever kill. I do not believe that that's the situation. I believe there is justifiable circumstances that allow us to defend those who need defending. Say one more thing about this before we go into murder. These next 3 commands really are only 2 words. There is no thou shalt not murder. What God said at the top of the mountain was how we used to say to our kids, no talking. You knew what your parents were saying, what your teacher was saying if you saw a sign in the library, no talking. This says no murder, no adultery, no thievery. It's that simple.
That's the King's English there.
Yes, which we add a lot of thous and shalls. But let's get down to murder. Why not? I mean, this one seems like a given, right? But why does it need to be stated? What's the difference between you and an animal?
Soul.
A soul?
Conscious reasoning.
Reason? You were made in the image of God. You were made in the image of God. Your life is sacred. Now, not everybody sees it that way, do they? When people go to extremes, your life becomes worthless. Have we seen this recently? Last week. Listen. This is not how things should be. We need to make sure that we treat life the way God would have us. Our society needs that. This is a pillar for our society. No murder. No adultery. Look, the first commandment, God's looking to protect you, is he not? What's this one for? This is to protect our children. What will destroy a marriage but adultery? Your kids need that protection. That generation needs to be secure. And this has always been another pillar for us. No adultery. No stealing. How do we get along in a society if there aren't property rights? And are there property rights granted to you by God? Are there? You betcha. You betcha. What is your ultimate property?
Yourself.
Have we not run up against this here recently? Where you aren't in charge of your body? Be careful. People will steal that from you. In fact, this is where abolitionists really got the idea. Slavery is stealing someone's body. That's the ultimate theft. For us, if we're going to get along together, if we're going to exchange in commerce together, if we're going to trust one another, no stealing. What belongs to you, doesn't it? You shall not lie against your neighbor. You can steal a man's property. You can steal a man's reputation. Lying is a big deal. And we kind of belittle it, don't we? Because we say, well, what's the harm in a
White lie.
I'll tell you the harm in a white lie is our whole judicial system crumbles. In fact, if you want to take a tyranny down, what you really need to do is tell the truth. It's hard sometimes for folks to tell the truth now because of our society, our culture, our canceling of one another. People don't feel like they can tell the truth. It's very important. Means everything. You know, all of the prior commandments really deal with action. This is the first commandment on that list of 10 that deals with your heart at all. You're not dealing with anything but behaviors when you say no murder, no lying. What does the 10th commandment say?
Don't think about it.
No coveting. No coveting. This is where all the other sins are born. Let's take a quick look at King David. What went wrong? He coveted Uriah's wife. It wasn't just a woman. It was a specific woman who was married to a specific man. And David said, I want that woman. He coveted Uriah's wife. What happened next? adultery. What happened next? Murder. Then he was living a lie, wasn't he? And what did Nathan do? When Nathan came in and said, "This is what you've done," he compared it to theft. What did the rich man steal from the poor man? He stole his little ewe lamb. All those prior commandments are taken care of right here in the tent. This is where they're seated, in your heart. Christ went further, didn't he? And that was really one of the most radical things. We take the Sermon on the Mount for granted. We grew up with it. But Christ took all of these and he said, these are heart issues. Just like Gary's prayer. It's about our heart. Where does adultery begin? In your heart. Where does theft begin? In your heart. Where does murder begin? In your heart. Where does Christ reside? So can we have those two together? That's when we have a problem, isn't it? We have the vertical and we have the horizontal. And I love how the fifth one fits right here in the middle. Took those out of order because this is at the heart of our families. The fifth command: honor your father and your mother. Jimmy and I were having a discussion about this commandment the other day. And I said, one thing that is not commanded is love. You're not commanded to love your father. You're not commanded to love your mother. What you're commanded to do is to honor them. Why is that?
Because then the love will be there.
You know, if I honor something, I prefer it, don't I? If I honor something, I respect it. If I honor something, I take care of it. But this relationship, God knows, is going to be stressed in a certain way that no other relationships are. Some of us have no father at all, or an evil father. And this is what Jenny and I were discussing. How do you fulfill a commandment like this when there's actual evil being done? Well, in Ephesians, where this is given to us under the new covenant, Paul says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. It is the first commandment with promise, and that promise that it may be well with you and you may live long on this earth." My mom used to use that one. You want to live long on this earth?
I brought you into this world.
I brought you into this world. I'll take you out. Look, our homes really are where we first learn about God. Young children, babies, they need what? They need your protection. They need you to provide for them. They need your sustenance. They need your knowledge. You are teaching them their language. You're teaching them how to walk, talk, behave. God said to Moses, "You will be a God unto Pharaoh." What are you to your children? When they grow up, you are a God to them. You are everything to them. So how do you behave?
That's a lot of responsibility.
It is a lot of responsibility. I shuddered at having children because I thought to myself, I was so happy when they married. I just took this and pushed it right onto Marinko. I pushed it right into Jesse's lap. Fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath. Is that easy to do? I mean, it's so easy, Paul brings it up and specifies it, doesn't it? He says, look, you're gonna upset those children, but you need to be careful. You need to be careful that you don't damage that relationship. How a child feels towards his father may be very indicative of how he will feel towards his heavenly Father. I'm just taking that responsibility, Steve, and I'm just piling it on. What is the Father? Note that it's the Father who is given this directive. For you shall bring them up in the training and the admonition of the Lord. How many men, how many of us have just handed that over to the wife? Your dad, for whether good or bad, he brought you up in that training. Yes, Jim?
Yep.
There were times you may have been provoked to wrath, and he had to dial that back. I don't know. But you fathers are responsible for this. We've done it with our classes. We push it off onto Jane. The only training they get comes from Trundy, comes from Katie, or does it come from the Father? And if you're nervous about that, fine. Be nervous about that. Were you nervous today when you stood up? You should have been a little bit. I'm terrified. But do it. Do it. It is a direct command to you, fathers. If you're not sure, well then study it, learn it, and do it. But don't just assume that their moms are going to take care of it. That's not what the passage says. It says fathers for a reason. And you only got one run. People come, you have regrets? I got regrets. Anyone who tells you they don't have regrets? You got one run. Mom came to me and she said, you know, if we get our relationship with God correct and we get our relationship with men correct, then you really need to tell them Micah 6 verse 8. And I think she's right about that. God has shown, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justly? This is justly, right here. To love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. If you're humble before God, every one of these lessons we've ended with you right here. Every time you're going to find yourself right here. This is what the gospel is all about. This is why we're here. This is why we try to live our lives so that people can see Christ in our lives, because you belong right here at the base of the cross. Now you have a choice at the base of the cross. You have a choice to either have faithful obedience, or you can just turn a rebellious heart away from God. He will not invade your heart without your permission. What does faithful obedience look like to you? Look around this room. Because when we started back, I said there's a problem between you and God. There's a problem that is a continual problem for man in this vertical relationship. That was sin. Sin gets in the way. Sin kills that relationship. Sin separates you. That's the definition of death. What do you do about sin? Well, it comes right back here, doesn't it? Because this is where sin was taken care of for you. This is where the sacrifice was paid for you. This is where the blood of Christ has its power in regard to your heart. He is the mediator. He's the mediator between you and God, and he's the mediator between you and I. How do we get along? Well, you love me, you don't murder me. We don't commit adultery. We don't steal. We don't lie. We don't covet. Well, that's the third lesson. We wrap that up. I'll say one more thing, and then we will close with our song. We're going to Fred and Nana's house. And there's a really nice lake there. We've baptized people in that lake. The waters of baptism are there. There's a group of loving people that would love nothing more than to help in that baptism. If it is on your heart to submit in faithful obedience, talk to us. As a grown male, conscious of your obligation to God and finding yourself at the base of that cross, and you want to begin that walk, talk to us. Any one of us, and we'll get that worked out, okay? Okay, where's Blaine?
When we walk with the Lord.